Welcome to Political Sin. In this video, I want to talk about immigration. And yes, this article right here by George Borjas, I think that's how you say his name. He is, I believe, this guy right here, George J. Borjas. He's an American economist and professor of economics and social policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. He has been described as America's leading immigration economist and leading skeptic of immigration among economists. So this is a guy that we need to be listening to, and this article was published during the Trump and Clinton run in 2016. Now, I'm personally on the side of lower immigration, lower illegal immigration for sure. So I'm on more of a nationalistic side of the policy in this debate. So I think this article right here does immigration justice of what I personally think, and also from a professional who presents both sides of the argument. So let's get into the title. Really, the title says, yes, immigration hurts American workers. And yes, I think that's very important for people to understand. If you want people, especially illegal immigrants who are illegal, who shouldn't be here, you have to accept that them being here hurts people that are already here. So people like me, I have to compete with immigrants or illegal immigrants for jobs and wages. So let's just dive into the article real quick. So the first couple paragraphs right here, it talks about how immigration can be a net good for our nation and how immigration can hurt the American worker. So that's literally the argument right there. You have one side, Democrats, basically making the argument that immigration is a net good for us. And we'll get into how it's a net good. And you have Trump, who's more pro-American, pro-American nationalist, basically saying, look, if you're accepting all these immigrants, you are destroying American workers' lives, or you're at least harming their lives, their way of living. It says this second message might be hard for Americans to process, but anyone who tells you that immigration doesn't have any negative effects doesn't understand how it really works. I love that sentence so much because it's hard. I feel like I've been making these arguments against immigration, against just like the normal. I'm a normie, guys. I'm a normal person. I go about my day. I don't make a lot of money. I just talk to regular people on a daily basis. And it's like the lack of education, which is really hurts us in the end, because at the end of the day, when you lack the information and you're just a normie person that's trying to talk to someone, like when you're trying to say, like, this is what's been studied. So I sometimes make this joke, like, oh, follow the science. But science can be biased as well. And so if it's good science, it'd be replicated, right? It'd be replicated by whichever bias side, and you'll have like the same outcome happen, right? That's what the scientific method, whatever, is about, right? So when the supply of workers goes up, the price that firms have to pay to hire workers goes down. Guys, look, when supply, it's just simple supply and demand. When there are more workers, that means the business has this epic supply of all these workers and with various skills that they can hire. So they could get rid of you for whatever reason, because they could always pick up someone else, especially if you have low skills. And if it's the opposite, so if you go more nationalistic like I am, like I want to be, where you're more pro-American, pro-natives that live here already, you're going to have less immigration. You're going to have less illegal immigrants that these businesses can hire, meaning now there's less supply of workers. So now you have the businesses have to compete for your services. Now that will raise your wages. That will make these businesses want to keep you, want to value you. Wage trends over the past half century suggest that a 10% increase in the number of workers with a particular set of skills probably lowers the wage of that group by at least 3%. Even after the economy has fully adjusted, those skilled groups that receive the most immigrants will still offer pay relative to those that receive fewer immigrants. Both low and high skilled natives are affected by the influx of immigrants. But because a disproportionate percentage of immigrants have few skills, it is low-skilled American workers, including blacks and Hispanics, who have suffered most from this wage dip. The monetary loss is sizable. The typical high school dropout earns about $25,000 annually. According to census data, immigrants admitted in the past 2 decades lacking a high school diploma have increased the size of low-skilled workforce by roughly 25%. As a result, the earnings of this particularly vulnerable group dropped by between $800 and $1,500 each year. Guys, that first of all, if you don't have a high school degree, you're already screwing yourself right there. Now you're you're struggling to make that living wage. Not only that, you are now, let's say there's a lot of illegal immigrants here, right? And they have no skills, they can barely speak English. You're competing with those guys. And those guys are willing to work hard as hell. Hard as hell. They ran away from Mexico. They ran away from something that is dangerous. So they'll work for nothing. They'll work for very little because the option in America to work for low wages is better than working or just living in Mexico, living in a country that is letting their citizens, destroying the lives of their own citizens. So they cross the border into America because we have more opportunity, just that they can live more freely. That alone is valuable enough for them to come here, knowing that they'll get paid very little and they'll work hard as hell for that job. So now that is the supply of low skilled workers that's coming in, that is battling with blacks and Hispanics. All right, this is what this said in the article. This is what's been studied. This is not anything that I'm making up. This is not racist. This is reality. Okay, so if you're a low skilled worker, you are the one getting screwed the most. And who are the ones voting Republican? Who's the ones voting right? Trump is literally trying to protect the American workers. So if you're a low skilled worker, it's in your benefit to vote for the side that is protecting your wages, protecting your job. That is in all protecting your livelihood. That's the point that I want to drive home. That this affects American Hispanics, American blacks, is letting this influx of illegal immigrants or immigrants to come in, especially if they're low skilled. If you're competing with these workers that are willing to get paid less, driving your wages down, and taking your job potentially that could be going to you. So what happens when you get your job taken or you don't have a job? They're going to create more welfare programs and such, which we'll get more into the article. We don't need to rely on complex statistical calculations to see the harm being done to some workers. Simply look at how employees have reacted. A chicken processing plant in Georgia was raided by immigration agents, and 75% of its workforce vanished over a single weekend. Shortly after, Kreider placed an ad in a local newspaper announcing job openings at higher wages. Similarly, the flood of recent news reports on abuse of H-1B visa programs shows that firms will quickly dismiss their current tech workforce when they find cheaper immigrant workers. So let's start with the 75% of his workforce vanished over a single weekend. And then they placed an ad in a newspaper announcing job openings at higher wages. Simple supply and demand. So if you get rid of all these illegal immigrants or immigrants, the businesses is screwed. They need workers. So they'll give you a higher pay. And not only are they giving you a higher pay, they're going to hire Americans, people that live here, that need jobs, that need livelihood, need a purpose in their life. So that is the balance between bringing people in, immigrants or illegal immigrants, compared to people who are already here. So that is so we know that affects your wages in a negative way. If immigrants, if you flood, the workforce with more people, obviously your wages is going to go down because now businesses have more options. And so regarding the H-1B visa programs, that these tech companies, they have like a lot more, they're way more abusive towards these to this visa program, because now they could hire cheaper workers from overseas and have more control over what they can do for your company. Because if you hire these non-American workers, they'll specifically do what you want them to do for lower wages, and if you don't like them, you could just ship them back to their country. Now we're at the part of the article where it explains how this benefits businesses, how this hurts American workers, and how this benefits immigrants. That's only one side of the story. Somebody's lower wage is always somebody else's higher profit. In this case, immigration redistributes wealth from those who compete with immigrants to those who use immigrants, from the employee to the employer. And the additional profits are so large that the economic pie accruing to all natives actually grows. I estimate the current immigration surplus, the net increase in the total wealth of the native population, to be about $50 billion annually. But behind that calculation is a much larger shift from one group of Americans to another. The total wealth redistribution from the native losers to the native winners is enormous. Roughly $500 billion a year. Immigrants to gain substantially. Their total earnings far exceed what their income would have been had they not migrated. So what they say native losers, they're saying the regular American worker here, to the native winners. So the native winners are going to be those business owners. That's how I'm interpreting this. Immigrants to gain substantially. Their total earnings far exceed what their income would have been had they not migrated. So of course, immigrants come here for a better opportunity. Illegal immigrants come here for a better opportunity. And someone else's loss is someone else's gain in this situation. And that is the Americans that are already here, that are just trying to live a decent life. When we look at overall value of immigration, there's one more complicating factor. Immigrants receive government assistance at higher rates than natives. The higher cost of all services provided to immigrants and lower taxes they pay, because they pay lower earnings, inevitably implies that on a year-to-year basis, immigration creates a fiscal hole of at least $50 billion, a burden that falls on the native population. What does it all add up to? The fiscal burden offsets the gain from the $50 billion immigration surplus, so it's not too far-fetched to conclude that immigration has barely affected the total wealth of natives at all. Instead, it has changed how the pie is split. With the losers, the workers who compete with immigrants, many of those being low-skilled Americans, spending a roughly $500 billion check annually to the winners. So you could think of this as like, this is how the wealth gap grows. Part of the wealth gap disparity, immigration is a part of that. So, because just think about it. If you pay immigrants at a lower wage, that makes the business owner get more richer, and that contributes to make those wealth gaps even bigger. By adding in those immigrants, yes, overall our GDP, all that stuff on a national scale looks good, but the everyday worker is the one that, the American everyday worker is the one that's getting screwed, is making less money because there's too many people here fighting for jobs while the businesses and corporations win at the end. They always win. Once we understand immigration this way, it's clear why the issue splits Americans, why many low-skilled native workers are taking one side and why immigrants and businesses are taking another. Our immigration policy, any immigration policy, is ultimately not just a statement about how much we care about immigrants, but how much we care about one particular group of natives over another. This statement, this paragraph is very important. Yes, do I think personally, I think immigrants are a good thing. I think we should help out as many people as we can. But we have to understand how much it hurts someone else. If it's hurting other people where they're unemployed, they can't make a living wage. Just think about all of our arguments. They want to raise minimum wage up to $15 an hour. They're saying things like, from the study, 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So in what world and fantasy are you guys living in where you say, yeah, it's a good idea to flood more workers in, more people in, that makes that if we're living in that situation of 78% people living paycheck to paycheck, they want to raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour because people can't get by on one job. So how the hell does that make sense to add more people in there? Okay, simple supply and demand. If there's not enough good paying jobs, and we're all fighting over these decent paying jobs, why are you adding more people to that situation? Why are you making it worse? And at the end of the day, it ends up helping the corporations, and that's probably the most frustrating thing to get people to understand. And that is one of the reasons why I'm pro like border control, strong immigration laws, because I want my own people, I want Americans themselves to be able to live better lives than they're living right now. So by adding more people into that pot, in that pool, you are saying, look, we don't care about the American people. And that's literally what the Democrats are for. Before, Democrats were for strong border control, building a wall and that stuff. That's not a Trump thing. There's a video of like Bill Clinton giving a speech over how they're gonna ship these illegal immigrants over and all this stuff. Okay, what we need to understand is the reality of the trade-offs. The trade-off here is: are you picking do you want to improve the American workers? Or do you want to improve the businesses and the immigrants' lives? That's really what you're trying to balance there. And I agree that if there's the best of both and all sides win, yes, if they could improve the American workers' lives, then I wouldn't have a problem with immigration. But it clearly has an effect on everyday people, everyday workers. And this disproportionately affects the low-skilled Hispanics, low-skilled Black workers. And that contributes to the wealth disparity. So immigration has something to do with all of this, okay? That's why it matters. Is there a potential immigration policy that considers the well-being of all Native Americans? Maybe so. It's not a ban on immigrants or even on low-skilled immigrants. High-skilled immigration really can make America wealthier. The steady influx of legal immigrants also produces more taxpayers who can assist financially as the native population ages. Then there's the matter of principle. Many Americans feel that it is a good thing to judiciously give some of your tired, your poor, your huddled masses a chance. But we're worrying about the wrong things with policy fights focused on how many and which immigrants to accept, and not enough on how to mitigate the harm they create along the way. Thank you. That's how I feel. I always end up on the side of always defending Donald Trump. I voted for Trump. But at the end of the day, I am for policy. Who does the policy help? Who does policy harm? And how are they going to go about it? We need to find a way to mitigate this stuff. The same thing with COVID-19, like the same thing with immigration. We have to make sure that we're not ruining people's lives that are already here in America. Let's not destroy those people's lives, because if you're just accepting more and more and more people, all you're saying is we care less about this other group of people. And that tends to be the American workers, the average, everyday, lower skilled workers. To use a label recently coined by Larry Summers, a responsible nationalist, policy cannot ignore the reality that immigration has made some natives poorer. Please accept that, guys. A policy that keeps them in mind might tax the agricultural and service companies that benefit so much from low-skilled immigrants and use the money to compensate low-skilled Americans for their losses and to help them transition to new jobs and occupations. Bill Gates claims that Microsoft creates 4 new jobs every H-1B visa granted. It's true, firms like Microsoft should be willing to pay many thousands of dollars for each of those coveted visas. Those funds could be used to compensate and retrain the affected natives in the high-tech industry. But let's not be naive. Policy fights over immigration have often been fierce, taking decades to get resolved. To even partially compensate those Americans who lose from the current policy would require massive new government programs to supervise a massive wealth redistribution totaling tens of billions of dollars. Oh, this is just like a huge bureaucracy in making our welfare program bigger. I hate that so much. That is part of the libertarian argument in here. Let me just finish reading this and I'm going to go in. The employers that profit from the way things are won't go along with these transfers without an epic political struggle. And many of the libertarians who obsessively advocate for open borders will surely balk at such a huge expansion of government. To make this work, Clinton and her supporters will have to acknowledge that our current immigration policy has indeed left some Americans behind, and Trump and his supporters will have to acknowledge that a well-designed immigration plan can be beneficial. All this is probably not going to happen, but only then can we have a real debate over immigration policy. Okay. Yes, I personally, I'm okay with immigration on a small scale. It's like I'm okay with welfare. Just minimalize it. This is why I become pretty much a proponent for UBI. If they're going to tax us, we might as well do the tax where we get the money back. This gives us, not only that, you have to be an American citizen. So that's one way to attack this is if we do UBI, it solves all of this stuff really. But I'll save UBI for a different video. But let's stick to immigration. Let's just stick to the problems here. We have to recognize that immigration helps businesses and immigrants. It does not help American workers. And you have to mitigate that. If you don't, or if you do and you do it through more welfare, all you're saying is, okay, we want more immigrants. If the immigrants are taking away American workers' jobs, that leaves them at home making no money. And then all you're saying is, we'll give you welfare in order for you to live somewhat a decent life. See, this is why no one on the right wants to put Americans on welfare when they could be out living a life, working for a company with higher wages and having a sense of purpose, contributing to our society, rather than feeling someone like me. If that was me in this situation where someone took my job and I'm at home and now I'm on welfare, that will make me kind of depressed. I would want to get out of that situation. But man, it really just becomes UBI as a solution for all this stuff. This handles all that, all of that. And it makes that would make it even more pro-immigration, because like you could bring in more people and then all their tax dollars and whatever, if we tax like these big tech companies, that's all just going to flow back into all of us. And we could do what we want with that money. I just want people to recognize that immigration does hurt American workers. It only benefits the business and the actual immigrants, because obviously they wouldn't come here They only come here because it's the better option than wherever they came from. How this isn't racist or anything at all. This is literal reality, and there are trade-offs in accepting more immigrants. It's simple supply and demand. I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you guys taking your time to listen to me talk about this. But at the end of the day, when I talk about politics, I'm not saying things out of my butt. All right, I'm not talking out of my ass here. I just literally read and just try to say what I just read. And good thing it's from Politico, because a lot of people on the right wing would say this is more left leaning or whatever. I mean, this guy is from Harvard or whatever. But still, I know I look like a person that doesn't know much, but I'm trying my best to be informed, and I want other people to be informed too. Yeah, please like the video. If you guys have, which side are you guys on? Are you guys on the side of immigrants and businesses, or are you guys on the side of American workers? Let me know in the comments below. And we all die. Live the life you want to live. Are you guys going to be a uniter, or you guys want to be a divider? I think informing people to the best of your ability is a uniter. Don't be this toxic divider person. Go out there and be a positive person. I'll see you guys on the next one.